Well, it looks like somebody at Bloomberg is going to lose their job. At least that's the way it looks to me when we see an article like this come out that says it's now clear that QE was a colossal policy mistake. And in light of all of the garbage opinions that are put out on Bloomberg, being a part of that mainstream media financial machine, trying to back up everything that the government and the central banks do, it was a shock to me to see this come out. So I'd like to go through a few main points and just show you just how much of a breath of fresh air it is to see some truth get put out there about central banks' quantitative easing and the trillions of dollars of shenanigans that they've pulled over the last few years. Real quick word from today's sponsor, iTrustCapital. iTrustCapital allows you to use your retirement account to invest in Bitcoin, gold, and silver. Many people, when they buy gold or silver or Bitcoin for the first time, they just go out and they make the purchase, whether it's from a gold dealer or buying Bitcoin from an exchange. Later on, whether it's a year or 2 years down the road when the price has gone up a lot, they go to sell it and realize they're hit with a capital gains tax. This leaves people with a sour taste in their mouth when investing in gold and silver and Bitcoin because they're saying, hey, look, I know that inflation is eating away at my fiat currency, my dollars, but if I put my money in sound money, if I buy gold, if I buy silver, if I buy Bitcoin, I'm going to get hit with a tax on it anyway. And that's why it's so important to take advantage of retirement accounts when you are diversifying your assets. The problem is most brokerages, most retirement accounts do not allow you to invest in gold or silver or Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies. That is where iTrustCapital comes in. You can buy and sell Bitcoin, gold, silver inside of your IRA anytime. You can use this retirement account to make new contributions, or you can even use old retirement account money rolled over into an IRA with iTrustCapital. With everything going on right now in the crypto industry, many people are concerned about any exchange, any place that allows you to buy cryptocurrencies, about security and fraud. With iTrustCapital, they never take custody of your assets. There is no mingling of assets, and there is no way for iTrustCapital to access clients' money. It is securely stored in third-party institutional storage that is cold storage. And it's a regulated trust company so that it is a legal IRA. Like I said, they take security very seriously, which is why I use and recommend iTrustCapital to invest in gold, silver, and Bitcoin for your retirement account. And if you use my link in the description below, there's a special bonus waiting for you as well. Now, obviously, I don't want to give them too much credit because they don't go nearly as far enough as they should here. However, got to give them credit for going at least in the right direction. As you can see, it starts off with a bang in this opinion piece from Allison Schrager, where she says the great quantitative easing experience was a mistake, and it's time for central banks to acknowledge it for the failure it was and retire it as soon as they're able. So first off, what is QE? QE is quantitative easing, and that is the title given to what central banks do when they buy bonds. It started during the 2008 financial crisis when central banks wanted to inject liquidity. But since interest rates being at zero wasn't enough, they decided to buy long-term bonds and mortgage-backed securities. She points out that while this was supposed to be just a temporary emergency measure, we got QE1, then QE2, then QE3, then QE4, and then when COVID broke out in the response to that and lockdowns and the trillions of dollars of spending, we got trillions of dollars worth of QE in order to bail out the entire financial system and the entire economy at that point. Which, as you can see here, the chart of their balance sheet broken down between treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, they just continually added to their balance sheet over and over and over again for over a decade. Now, for a little bit of background here, quantitative easing was the name given for this practice because they didn't want to call it debt monetization. The reason why they didn't want to call it debt monetization is because debt monetization was actually illegal, and that was one of the rules put in place when they started the Federal Reserve in 1913 because people were afraid of this very thing happening. People were afraid that if there was a central bank that had a monopoly on printing money, then eventually the government could use that as a source of funding because the money printer could just go and loan money to the United States government. So they made that practice illegal and said the Fed could not loan to the United States government. So how were they able to do something that they called QE, which was actually debt monetization, when it was illegal? Well, they found a little loophole and they didn't directly lend those newly printed dollars to the government. Instead, they just bought bonds off of the open market. So you have the government over here that's borrowing money. Who are they borrowing it from? Banks. So banks take cash, loan it to the US government. But the banks suddenly, right after they buy that loan, don't want it anymore, so they sell it to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve prints some cash, gives it to the bank sells that bond to the Federal Reserve. Now the bank has cash again. And what do? They turn right back around and loan new money to the federal government. So the end result is still debt monetization. It's newly printed money going through banks to the US government in the form of a loan that is owed to the Federal Reserve. That is debt monetization, and it makes no difference that there is a bank acting as the middleman. In fact, it does make a little bit of a difference. It just means that there's a nice little profit center for the banks to be able to act as that middleman. Got to give the suits their cut. And hopefully, unsurprisingly, the research shows that the record of QE boosting an economy is dubious at best. While all the research coming from central banks say that QE was a great success, only half of it from academics found any benefit. You mean to tell me that the people whose jobs rely on somebody thinking that they're doing a good job are putting out reports saying that they're doing a good job? Shocker. One of the reasons that QE is not as effective as the central banks thought it should be is because it distorts risk assessment. Now, what this means and what this really boils down to is the role of prices in an economy. Prices are information about the relative scarcity of one item versus everything else. If something, for instance, labor, is in very short supply, then people will be willing to pay more dollars to get labor, therefore wages will go up. That's just another way of saying they would have to sell things at higher prices or sell more things in order to get the same amount of value to exchange that for labor. So labor being in short supply or being scarce, the price would go up. So prices are simply information that's being conveyed to everybody in the economy about how scarce something is relative to everything else. And when something becomes abundant enough, it becomes easy enough to get that the price may approach zero. Something like sunlight is free because it is so abundant, anybody can get as much of it as they want. An example that Jeff Booth points out in his book, The Price of Tomorrow, is that something like oxygen is free because it is super abundant on land, but as soon as you go to somewhere where it's not abundant, like underwater scuba diving, you do have to pay for it because suddenly it's scarce. And so when you have artificial buying or selling of anything, you are going to suppress or artificially boost the price of that item. And it's the exact same thing with bonds. When the central bank prints money and goes out into the open market and buys bonds, that is buying pressure that wouldn't be there otherwise. That means the price is higher than it would have been otherwise. And when the price of something is artificially higher, it conveys the scarcity aspect of the information to the entire economy. Flip side of that coin is that it makes money more abundant. And when money is more abundant, money is cheaper, which is just another way of saying that prices of everything else go up. So you convey message to the economy about the price or the value of money, and you say money is cheap, money is abundant, so people go out and spend it. They think the savings pool is large, when in fact, it is not large, and prices have to respond upwards as a result, therefore giving us the inflation, record high inflation that we see today. Further, QE has other effects like propping up zombie companies, because when you make money abundant and debt cheap to get, that allows companies that are not profitable and should not be able to continue to exist in a regular free market without intervention, they would fail. Now they can access cheap debt and continue surviving which means they're continually wasting more and more of society's resources and assets. And instead of those assets and that ownership of those resources being in responsible hands and producing, being more productive with it, those are kept in the hands of irresponsible and less competent owners that are wasting resources. 3 more points here that I'd like to point out. 1, bond traders have an incentive to invest more in figuring out what the central bank will do, less in figuring out what the market fundamentals are. This refers to the over-financialization of an economy that happens when you have top-down control through monetary policy. The most important thing on every CEO's mind right now, every trader's mind, every investor's mind, and every employee's mind is, what is the Federal Reserve going to do next? Are they going to make prices go up, or are they going to make prices go down? Should I spend and borrow because prices are going to be going up, or should I save and should I pay off my debt because prices are going to be going down? Think of all of the 300 million people in America and all the decisions that they're making on a daily basis trying to figure out what they should do in light of what the top-down central planners are going to be doing, instead of just focusing on keeping their head down, being more productive, and being financially responsible. Because in this world, financially responsible depends on what the Federal Reserve is going to do. Further, it blurs the relationship between fiscal and monetary policy, threatening central bank independence. This is something Ray Dalio started talking about years ago, saying as you move forward with this kind of monetary policy, you get to a point where you start to blend monetary and fiscal policy. This basically means that the federal government cannot spend as easily without the central bank backing it up. And so we could very easily get to the point where if the central bank doesn't do what the government wants it to in order to support its spending, we could see a complete merging and a folding of the Federal Reserve underneath the Treasury, and Congress taking complete control of the money printer. All it takes is a rewriting of the Federal Reserve Act. It's not difficult, and it could happen like that. And if you think the problems are bad now with how unlimited the government spending is right now, with the Federal Reserve being somewhat independent, imagine how bad it could get if they just have full control of the money printer and they have no worries about any debt ceiling, no worries about any borrowing limits. All they have to do is flip on the printer and spend as much money as they want. And then finally, there's a long-running debate among macroeconomists over monetary policy. Should it follow preset rules based on data, or should they be able to make it up as they go? And this gets to the heart of the matter that complex systems thrive and do best when they are governed by rules, not rulers. This means that a set of rules, whatever those rules are, as long as they are unchanging, that is a better system that allows for dynamic behavior on top of it. Imagine a foundation that's really strong and unmovable. You can build things on top of it that move and that are very strong and dynamic if the foundation is strong and unmovable, versus a system where the rules are constantly changing because they're governed by a ruler who's making it up as they go along, where every time a new person gets in power, they make up new rules. In that kind of a system, you have unpredictability and uncertainty, and nobody can make any long-term plans, and it causes destruction in a complex system because you have second and third order effects that compound on each other that the rulers can't anticipate ahead of time. This is like building something, a structure on a foundation that is constantly shifting in unpredictable ways. So a set of unchanging rules is better for a thriving ecosystem if the system is complex versus a system governed by rulers that make it up as they go, because the chances that they're going to screw it up are almost guaranteed. So it's better to have a system of unchanging rules that at least people can predict and learn how to navigate and produce successfully, even if the rules themselves are flawed. Politically, this is called rule of law versus rule of man. And this is why sound money is so essential for a thriving economy, because sound money, at its most basic definition, is money governed by rules, not rulers. That's why fiat sucks and ruins everything in an economy, because it's governed by rulers that use it and change it to their own advantage, versus sound money, whether it's gold, whether it's Bitcoin, these are monies that are ruled by rules, whether it's the laws of physics or open source decentralized software that cannot be artificially changed by a small group of people. You can't just artificially increase the amount of gold. You can't just decide to increase the amount of Bitcoin. But with fiat, you certainly can. And that is why abuse of a fiat currency system is the nail in the coffin of every advanced economy. And the debasement of money is the hallmark of the fall of empires. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.